Hello, everybody. How are you over there?
Doing
Hello,
well.
hello.
How are you doing, Wayne?
Fantastic. I'm great. I just woke up from a nap. How about you guys?
I love that honesty. I've been up for a while because I've been taking classes which are in Pacific time, but I'm currently in Korea, so I basically took overnight classes, but I still feel pretty energetic right now. How are you doing, Sophia?
Oh, I'm so excited for this. We've never done a live podcast recording like this before, and we are just so excited to be here. When we met on Clubhouse, and even though it was just audio, I felt so drawn to your energy, your enthusiasm, and so I told Tan we definitely have to chat with Wayne.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dayun. Thank you, Sophia. And I remember talking to you just slightly over a week ago because like a day or a week in Clubhouse is like eternity, right?
Yes,
Everyone's like
people spend so
reacting
much
over
time there. Yeah.
Are you still on Clubhouse every night, every day?
I definitely check in to at least one room every day.
Wow, I've actually quit Clubhouse for the past 3 days because of this particular event. So, because I know that if I don't get out of there, I won't be even 1% creative or productive, you know. But I'm not just saying that because I think it's a time waste or anything. It's actually a great platform, and I met so many new friends like you over there. If not for you, I wouldn't be meeting Dayun for the first time ever, you know, on my festival. So it's great to have you guys here. And of course, you have a fantastic podcast show that we want to jump in and talk about right away. Maybe, I don't know, starting with Dayun, can you maybe give us a story about your podcast?
Yes, of course. So my name is Talon and my co-host is Sophia, and we are part of Bamboo and Glass. We co-founded this podcast together, which is a space led by us who are two Asian American women, and we share underrepresented perspectives that shape our lifelong journey of learning and unlearning. So to kind of go back to the beginning of how this podcast even started, Sophia and I are actually in a long distance friendship. We actually met online originally. We had a couple mutual friends, but we officially met through Facebook Messenger, and we've been maintaining this long distance friendship for almost 8 years now. We never went to the same school, lived in the same city, or even worked at the same company, but we somehow just found ourselves really drawn to one another's conversations, being able to keep in touch during college, share our college experiences. And during our college time, we actually co-wrote a blog together to just asynchronously share what we're learning and unlearning at those moments. And something that happened upon graduation is that I just felt that I wanted to have some more real-time conversations with Sophia, because those moments where I did get to catch up with her were so meaningful to me, and the blog was all asynchronous, and I wanted a chance to react to her stories and her experience in real time and to dive deeper into those topics. And so we decided that it would just be such a fun way to start a podcast, to be able to put some of our stories out there, just see if anything it resonates with other folks. And so we just started sharing our conversations with each other and with friends and family, and now with so many people around the world, which is really, really exciting. We've been doing this podcast for 2 years, and we're now starting off our third season in 2021. And it's literally just us two. We are just two people working on this podcast, and it's been just such a delight. It's so life-giving, especially when we were both working full-time jobs. It's been such a great way to just exercise our creative juices and be able to always be looking out for inspiration and for inspirational conversations.
That's a fantastic introduction and story. Sophia, your turn now. Tell me the story behind the title or the name of the podcast. Why is it called Bamboo and Glass Podcast?
Yes, that's a great question. So it refers to the terms bamboo ceiling and glass ceiling, which are the kind of structural kind of challenges that exist that make it difficult for Asian Americans and women to reach the highest levels in these corporate environments. And even though that's the title of our podcast is not just about career. We just use these terms to allude to the fact that we are Asian American women, and everything that we experience and talk about is filtered through the lens of our identities and experiences.
Amazing. This is amazing so far, everyone. So it's like, I'm going to just immediately chime in and really talk about how Asians can break stereotypes in podcasting, right? I think this is one of the bullet points that we think that we should talk about, because it was one of the topic, I think, moderated by either by Sophia or somebody else. I just can't quite remember right now. I just woke up from my nap. I remember it was very intriguing because people like us, we are all either Asians or American Asians for the other people in the other parts of the world. I'm in Singapore. I'm 100% Singaporean, of course. Of course, I'm 100% Asian. And we all know that, in podcasting, in any realm, right, to be a success or to be someone who stand out from the noise, you really have to, be 100% you. You can only do you. And sometimes it's like even code switching or things like that, right? Just to appeal to a broader audience. It's actually, not frowned upon, but it's sometimes also necessary to actually, be nice to people, to conform or to be part of that broader appeal, right? So how do you actually think that, Asians can actually break that stereotypes in podcasting? Like how certain Asian American are also breaking stereotypes in politics in America, for example. Maybe you guys can give me your hot takes on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love this emphasis on being yourself and just telling authentic stories. And that's something that we really resonate with. The more that we are doing this podcast, the more we are meeting other creatives who are being themselves, the more we realize that the authentic stories that you put out there draw people who really resonate with you and your authentic self. So that's really important. And we would love to chat about some of the conventional wisdom that we heard when we were starting our podcast and how we are challenging that conventional wisdom. So the first is that a lot of content creation coaches advise you to stick to a niche, right? And this helps listeners to discover you, helps listeners to understand what they can expect from you and stick around. But for us, we really didn't want that rule to limit our exploration of the kinds of stories that we can tell. And we are so glad we made that decision just to be ourselves and really reflect honestly in real time about what we are learning and unlearning. Because you never really know at different stages of life what you're going to be learning and unlearning. And because we made that decision, we've been able to chat about such a wide range of topics that mean all mean a lot to us. Like, for example, topics include creating our own definitions of success, talking about self-empowerment, self-advocacy, advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion, becoming politically active and aware, and celebrating cultural traditions. These are all such different topics that all mean very much to us. I think the topic that is most different is that we actually turned our podcast into a dating show for 10 episodes. We can talk about that a little bit more later. The format was very different, and it was such a fun way to expand the way that we tell stories, expand the way that we hype up our guests and showcase their unique and beautiful life experiences. So I would encourage podcasters in Asia and around the world to break stereotypes and challenge conventional wisdom by seeing your niche as your unique personality and your unique intersection of experiences and interests. And we are really excited to see audio storytellers around the world expanding the types of stories and conversations you can have on a podcast. For example, we were talking about how we met on Clubhouse, and there are a lot of people experimenting with audio storytelling on Clubhouse. There are these rooms called social play rooms where people are just doing these improv games and really challenging like what kinds of stories and what kinds of spaces can you accomplish with just audio. And that's really exciting to be a part of. And so the second piece of conventional wisdom that we wanted to challenge is that we saw a lot of Asians and Asian Americans only telling stories alongside other Asian Americans, or only talking about experiences that are really specific to Asian Americans. Even though being Asian American is a very broad identity, there are a lot of podcasters, they really brand themselves as only talking about Asian American issues. And I think podcasting is a really amazing way to have candid conversations with people whose life experiences are different from yours. And we would love to see Asians starting and documenting conversations with folks that are not just Asian American, but other identities as well. And that's something that we wanted to explore. So for example, we changed the tagline of our podcast to, instead of focusing on like, oh, we are only telling stories about Asian American women, our tagline is really about, we are two Asian American women, and we can be involving anyone in our stories. And so one challenge for us in shifting to maybe talking to people, other other POCs, other people of color, is that we still want to make sure that when we're talking to someone whose life experience is really different from ours, we don't want to tokenize their life experience. We want to really understand and like dive into the uniqueness of it, but also recognize that there are so many other aspects of their life other than that one aspect of their identity. So yeah, those are two pieces of conventional wisdom that we're trying to challenge in creating our podcast.
Beautiful sharing, Sophia. And of course, we have to pass the mic to Dayun as well, because I think you have also very great insights about this topic. How do you think that Asians are actually breaking stereotypes using podcasting as the medium?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I guess I'll speak to at least my experience as like an Asian American, which is that there is a big culture of saving face, and really, like, I was just taught to not really share about my life, share about my journey and stories on a public platform, because it turns a lot of heads, and also it's just a very saving face mentality of what I'm saying is going to represent what people will think of my family, people will think of my community. And I think honestly, the friendships and the conversations that have given me the most life are the ones that are the most vulnerable. And I found that putting myself out there is a very vulnerable act, but it's also one of the most empowering, especially when I hear what things people are resonating with. For example, Sophia and we got to chat about some experiences with bullying that we had when we were younger, which honestly, like, we went through a lot of questioning of, is this even worth putting on the podcast? Are people going to think this is so silly? Or are people going to think this is so different from the content that we've been doing? But the response that we got on that was so positive. People really resonated with a lot of things that we said. And even some of like the petty things or the thoughts that were running through our heads, a lot of our friends were like, yep, I've had those same exact thoughts when I was younger, and that's just not talked about a lot. And so I look back on that episode really fondly, even though the actual recording, my hands were clammy, Sophia was shivering, and it's just always empowering me to think a bit more about what are other ways that I can showcase my vulnerability, and also balancing that with what Sophia is comfortable with. And so I think something else with this is I think in like Asian American families or Asian culture, like, there's just this unspoken rule of like, there's just boundaries that you're just supposed to understand without actually talking about them. And something that Sophia and I really take care to do in our co-partnership is to always be open about our expectations with one another. Like, when we started the podcast, we were very upfront about what topics we were not comfortable sharing about or talking about. And we always make sure to check in to see if that ever changes. So for example, maybe we weren't that comfortable talking about politics in the first year because we were just starting off and we were still finding our voice and figuring out our opinions, especially in the political climate. But in 2020, we ended up realizing that this was a topic that was really important to us because we were having so many conversations with our friends. So why not just put it on the podcast? And that change in our mentality, we were very open about. And I think that's another thing, just the expectation that you are supposed to be all put together, you're supposed to know everything, and not talk about the mistakes that you make. We're very open about mistakes or changes in thoughts, and we really try to embrace the change and make that a norm and just hope that that is a norm in our culture in the future as well.
Also very beautiful sharing. And of course, you mentioned about like judging yourself about the kind of content is appropriate or is comfortable enough for you to talk about, right, in your show. And it's something that every podcaster will definitely face the same challenge as well, or the same question. And some questions, that they will keep on asking even while they're doing a particular topic, for even like 1, 2, 3 seasons, and they're still asking, should I still be continuing saying all these things, or just diving deep into these topics, or even sometimes bring controversial topics into your show, right? And sometimes it's about being totally real and doing you, and also thinking in terms of like, does it have a broad appeal to my audience? Is it niche down until it's too niche down and nobody would then actually, care for it, and you appeal to a lesser amount of people? So it's like I also struggle with like, should I be talking about my favorite bands all the time? Should I always tell people that I love heavy metal music, for example? So that kind of like as you get into this podcasting so-called career, and then you get so immune to criticism or even feedback, right? And sometimes you actually grown accustomed to like just let the audience decide. Just do and say what you want, and then the actually critics or maybe the people who judge are basically actually not the creators. The audience actually decide whether it's appropriate, is right for them, and whether they will keep on tuning in to what you guys have to say or the kind of content you are creating, right? So it's like we do tend to overjudge ourselves in terms of like, is this good enough? Is this the right topic? Is this the kind of angle I want to go into? Should I even get even more and more controversial, for example? So I bet you guys struggle with that even on a daily basis, even though you're not in season 3, am I right?
Yeah. Year number 3, season number 3.
So it's like really amazing to hear how you guys, actually got together and start this Bamboo and Glass podcast. Maybe let's back up and go back to when you first started, right? How actually did you find each other? Like, and who decided on the name of the podcast in the first place?
I'll let Tan take that question.
Yeah, honestly, I just really treasure my friendship with Sophia, and something that I've always really admired about her was the thoughtful questions that she would ask me. And because of that, we did the blog together. And like I mentioned, I just felt like it would be so great to do something in real time where we are able to have these conversations, and also what's a way for us to hold ourselves accountable as well to, keep in touch, because we were in completely different cities, completely different time zones at the time. And I think I was just starting to get into listening to podcasts at the time. I was listening to some Asian American podcasters. I was listening to Code Switch, like some journalism podcasts, but I didn't really see any Asian American podcasters who were like us, where we had just graduated from college. We were in the midst of navigating adulthood, and most of the podcasters I was seeing were like in their late 20s, like early mid 30s, who have already kind of figured out a lot of their careers and have gotten their foot in the door with adulting. And I felt I just couldn't relate in some ways, and I felt that how refreshing would it be to be able to talk to someone about all of the struggles that we're having, like whether it's like negotiating salaries for our company, to talking about, I just am like struggling with finding an apartment as well. And so I just brought up the idea to Sophia, and I was like, Sophia, like, would you be interested in a podcast? And I just shot my shooted my shot there, and I wasn't sure how she would respond. And she was like, podcasting, like, I know a few things. I don't know that much about podcasting, but let's do it. And so we knew nothing about technology. We started off on a Facebook Messenger call, and I think I might have recorded on my end with my phone. And so the audio on one end is really bad. You can still listen to this on our podcast, actually. It's our first episode. And I think what's been so nice is how we weren't so fixated on being perfect with, like, we have perfectionism tendencies, but we made sure that we just knew that we were going to learn the most by doing it and by just putting ourselves out there. Mm-hmm. And as for the name, we just had this Google Doc brainstorming like all the different technologies, the different platforms we were going to use. And we were brainstorming different kinds of names as well. And I don't know, like Bamboo and Glass just really stuck out to us as a name that would really fit us well. Because at the time we were pretty focused on our careers because we had just graduated. And honestly, as a side note, SEO wise, like Bamboo and Glass does very, very well on the search engine, which I'm very, very happy about. And it's just so cool to hear how, like, I'll just meet another Asian American woman who's like, oh, like, I've heard of Bamboo and Glass. I didn't realize that you were behind that. And so it's just cool to be getting that kind of recognition, and for Bamboo and Glass to, like, people understand, and especially if you're an Asian American or an Asian American woman, like, what Bamboo and Glass means to you, even if we don't explicitly spell out bamboo ceilings and glass ceilings. So
and to tie it back to the point about and to tie it back to the point about not worrying too much about having a very specific niche, I think Bamboo and Glass, first of all, Tan came up with the name. Props to Tan, because the moment she said it, I absolutely loved it. And we've been able to have a lot of flexibility with the topics, because we can really mold our tagline to be different, and it really matches Bamboo and Glass, but it also helps us kind of shift the focus of our podcast. So at first, our first tagline was stories about Asian American women that anyone can learn from. Again, we wanted to make sure people knew that these stories about Asian American women could be understandable and really valuable to anyone. And then we're like, well, maybe we don't want to only feature Asian American women guests. So now our tagline, instead of the Asian American women describing who we have as guests, it just describes us as hosts. And so our new tagline is, Asian American women sharing the stories and perspectives that are shaping our learning and unlearning. And so Tan, props to you. That was a brilliant name. I can just see like this bamboo and glass, like we never have to change the name. There's so many like, infinite number of stories we can share with this name.
This is absolutely incredible. An unforgettable name for a podcast show. And of course, that actually costs less when you do a SEO keyword bidding. And of course, the fact that you guys came together and came out with such a great show, and in a very scrappy way, I would say, and not in a negative light, because I think scrappy is completely fine. That's how I recorded my first episode as well, by sticking a phone in front of a CMO guest and actually asking them 20 questions that I actually Googled, before meeting the CMO. And that was my first episode as well. And so it's like scrappy, but not crappy, right? And of course, the content value is always brought by the A game that the host and also the guests bring into that show. So on that note, I want to actually highlight some of our community listeners are watching this live on LinkedIn as well. So one of the community members, I think his name is Eric Poon, he has a question for both of you, It's right below here. I'm sure you can see it. When you start your podcast, what were your priorities? Content, theme, reach an audience, quality of recording, aesthetics? Or is it in this sequence? Or it's like some of it is included, some are not included? You can add on to it.
Yeah, wow. I actually think this might be close to the order that I would prioritize. Like I would say content and theme were the most important to us because again, what we treasured so much about our friendship was the questions that we would ask each other and the thoughtful responses. And so we always wanted to make sure we had really great content. Theme, again, going back to like a lot of things were going to come from the lens of being an Asian American woman. And I would say reach an audience. We both have a lot of experience being mentors. Like Sophia was like the equivalent of a resident assistant and a mentor at her school. And I did a couple of mentorship opportunities as well at my school and at my workplace. And being able, I think it was just natural for us to know the kinds of things that we noticed were really valuable to share with those mentees that we have, as well as our friends who are going through very similar experiences as us. And so I would say that reach an audience, like the audience was definitely at first people like Asian American women around our age. And that's really expanded since then. Like we have sometimes like high schoolers who are tuning into our podcast, which, oh my God, like props to them for being able to find these resources online and being so innovative and exploring. And also we have people who are in their 30s who are really resonating with what we're saying. And that just means a lot to us because I personally did not have a lot of older like Asian American like women figures in my life. And so it means a lot to be able to be connecting with those types of people. I would say that aesthetics, we did take a lot of care with our aesthetics, especially with the logo and the social media feed that we were going to create. We wanted it to be very accessible so that people would immediately know what content we were putting out there. And we also were very careful about making sure that this would come off as a podcast that a lot of different people could relate to. Like we didn't want to be too like feminine, like we didn't want to have like pastel colors and scripts. Like that also just isn't our personal aesthetic. And so by staying true to what we like, which is more gender neutral, like androgynous looks, I think it's been able to attract people on initial glance and to tune into like a first episode and to stick around for that. Quality of recording was definitely a little bit on the lower end of priorities, but we've since then we've learned so much, and that's one of the things we're always really excited to chat with people about, because I know that's that technicality is oftentimes a big barrier to people starting podcasts, which I don't think it should be. So,
very good point, Sophia. Would you like to chime in as well?
Yeah, I think Talon covered it perfectly. If I were to start over again, I think for aesthetics, we focused a lot on making sure that when people landed on our Instagram page, they knew what topics we covered. And again, because we don't have a very, very specific niche, we have a lot of different topics. And so it was really important for people to be able to see the range of topics that we covered. But something that we're doing differently now is that if you go on our Instagram page at bamboo and glass, you'll see that we started sharing reflection questions for each of our episodes. It was actually a recommendation from one of our listeners. A lot of people, when they listen to podcasts, they will be washing the dishes or driving. And she said, no, I'm sitting down at my desk taking notes and journaling. I was like, wow. And she's like, you should share reflection questions. And I was like, oh, that is such a fantastic idea. Like, what an amazing way to continue the conversation with our listeners beyond the episode. And so now we share 2 reflection questions every episode. And 2 days after we publish the episode, Tan and I will go live on Instagram, and we will reflect publicly and in real time on these questions together. And we invite people to jump into the live stream to share their thoughts, share questions. And I think it's also fun for people to see or like to compare our conversation when it's a little bit more scripted and structured and edited versus live. And I think people will notice that we're the same. It's the same personality. We just might have a little bit more ums and ahs because we're editing them out. But the sharing the reflection questions has been such a fun new thing that we're trying in season 3.
Talking about fun new things, right? Earlier, you have already briefly mentioned about this online dating thing. And which actually is the theme of your most listened to and most creative next date series. So I definitely have to ask you now, how did you guys actually took frustration of online dating and combine them with the compelling strength of podcasts to create your most listened to and most creative next date series?
Yes,
Sophia, take it away.
Yes, this was such a fun series. So before I was dating my partner, I really liked using dating apps because I thought it was so interesting to compare how different apps encouraged you to highlight different parts of yourself that enable you to connect with people who you might be romantically interested in. But there were 3 challenges that I experienced, or 3 frustrations I had with dating apps. And the first has to do with, the experience of getting to know people. So I would look at these people's profiles and they would say, oh, I'm so patient, I'm so this, I'm so this. And I was like, I'm less interested in how you describe yourself and more interested in how your loved ones would describe what it's like to be around you. I want to know, like, what kind of energy do you give off? What strengths do others notice about you? That was the first thing. And the second thing is when I was constructing my own profile, I took dating apps a little bit more. I was pretty sincere and serious on them. And I found that so many people, there were things that I would love to put on the app, but I just didn't know if people thought I would be too try hard or too serious. And so, for example, this podcast is a huge part of my life, but I was a little bit hesitant to put that on a dating app because I didn't want people to be like, oh my God, like, I don't know. I just didn't want it to come off as pretentious at all. I was very self-conscious about that. And then the third challenge I had was, let's just say I matched with someone and they were like, hey, do you want to meet up in person? I was so socially anxious. I just wanted to have a virtual vibe check and to kind of get to know their energy before committing to going on a date with them. And so these are the 3 things that I noticed. And I was like, I think podcasting, there are some things we can do with podcasts that could address these different challenges. So what we ended up doing is inviting one of our friends onto the show. And so Tan and I, we actually don't have overlapping friend circles. So anyone I invited would be a friend of mine and a stranger to Tan. And so in that way, when you invite them onto the show, you get that vibe check. You get to see how this person interacts with a friend and also with a stranger. So checks off one of those challenges. And during the show, before the show in preparation, we actually asked their friends to submit voice recordings answering a couple questions about them. So it'd be, let's say, Wayne, you are our guest. We would ask your friends, what is something that you love about Wayne? What is a story that Wayne has to tell on the show? What is something we can roast Wayne about? What is a strength of Wayne? What is something Wayne doesn't brag about enough and deserves to brag about? And in that way, we got all these different perspectives on this person. We got to play them in the show. I think having the variety in voices also made the episode so engaging to listen to. And we got to set you up to talk about yourself in a way that you might not really get to talk about yourself otherwise. Because when I ask you, like, Wayne, hey, your friends are asking you to brag about this part of your life, like, you're probably more excited to do that, whereas you don't really have a space to celebrate yourself otherwise. And so these episodes were so fun. We had so much fun meeting your friends, meeting my friends, and it was just an amazing way to celebrate our theme is learning and unlearning, and that's something that we got to celebrate with our guests as well, and get to see these silly, romantic, funny, serious, beautiful sides of them. And so that was one way we got to challenge our storytelling on podcasting, and we're so glad we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you girls are creating your own category. This is like a new genre itself, and I think if there is a genre for dating series, and this is probably you'll be the only ones doing this sort of series, and you'll be number one on your own charts.
Thank you.
So you guys come out with the idea. How about that? Maybe walk us through in terms of this creation process as well. In the beginning, was it awkward to do this sort of program and having a series where you guys were purely experimenting, right? You started with an experiment, and now you have really ran away with it, and it has become a really successful series, and actually your most listened to series.
Yeah, I will say I was definitely worried because I was like, it's so different from anything else we've done before. But Sophia and I created space, like a brainstorm session where we could chat about different ideas, what questions we could ask that would be meaningful to the friends. And honestly, it was really exciting because a lot of my friends were on that series, and a lot of them had never been on a podcast before, and they had never put themselves out there on the internet. And it was just so wonderful to witness how much fun and how comfortable they would get while they were in the recording, and to also just see them blushing when their friends were just celebrating them and affirming them in so many ways. And it was also just such a fun way for Sophia to get to know other parts of me as well, because some of these people are some of my closest friends from school or from work, and she's able to now hear some of these really silly stories about me that I also would not really bring up in a podcasting context necessarily. And so that was just really enjoyable. And I also, again, loved meeting Sophia's friends. I think what's so unique about this show is that a lot of other topics that we talk about, other episodes, it's oriented around the theme. And in Your Next Date, the theme is the person. So we could talk about literally anything under the moon. I could talk to one of Sophia's friends, and in the same episode, we're talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. And then we all of a sudden are talking about her job, where she is the most fulfilled, and her tagline is "I fix broken hearts" as her job. That's incredible for me to be able to talk about all of these different sides of her and not be tied down to one theme or one topic, and just celebrate who she is as a multifaceted individual. So it was really wonderful.
I'm sure you have whet our appetite, especially in this part of the world, in Asia, right? Where we have hardly any shows of this sort of format, and we'll all be dying to check out, your podcast. Tell what are the listeners, in Asia and America as well, who are also tuning in. What can we expect from season 3 of your podcast?
Yes, this is such a good question. So currently what we are doing, we are in the middle of a series on digital communities. So during the pandemic, our physical environment is obviously very limited. And so a lot of us have turned to digital communities. For example, Wayne, you have met Sophia on Clubhouse. That is an example of a digital community. We're also going to have an episode on Clubhouse, Wayne. So I would hope that you check that one out. And so digital communities is such a great way to connect with people around the world at any time of day. And we are talking to people about their experiences building platforms for community, moderating and sustaining communities, discovering community for themselves, and also creatively connecting with their fan community. And so in addition to representing these different ways of engaging with community, I feel like our guests this time around are really coming from a wide variety of backgrounds, whether it's career backgrounds, nationality, cultural, where they're living in the world and where they live today, whether they're using platforms that people are familiar with versus new platforms like Clubhouse. And so it's been really exciting to get to explore and also learn from these people things that I could also dive into and learn more about and share with my friends and my circle too. And Sophia, I did want to ask you about, since we're in the digital community series, I wanted to ask you, what is a topic that you're really excited to delve into in season 3 that you just want to put out there?
Yes. So one of our first episodes about digital communities was with the founders of The Cosmos. And they are an online digital community, and a home for Asian women to care for themselves, their community, and the world. And one theme that really resonated with me is the hard decisions that they made in building this community. And we were so inspired by hearing them, own up to their mistakes, share their journey very honestly with their community. And so I want to learn more from builders, founders, creators who have had to make these difficult decisions to make sure that they are living up to their values and that they are doing the right thing every step of the way instead of taking shortcuts. So how about you, Tan? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I've always been really interested in history. From like right now, I have been trying to learn more about my Korean heritage by reading Asian folk tales and also reading up on Korean politics to understand like my parents' reactions to whenever they're watching the news, because I'm staying with my parents right now. And I recognize that for me, it's definitely a lot easier to delve into a history of a place that feels a little bit more distant from me, because I am able to approach it with an open eye for curiosity, but definitely much harder to do for places that I've been associated with for a very long time. Like it's really hard to do that inner work and learn about your own roots. And so we did an episode way back when, I don't know if you remember, Sophia, but I think it was like episode 7 called Learning About Our Asian American History, where we covered some Asian American historical events. And a lot of those actually happened in our hometown, which is the Bay Area. And so something that Sophia said at the end of that episode really has stuck with me till this day, which is about how knowing this history would have empowered and emboldened her to, again, like see the possibility of what she could do and advocate for. And so I really want to continue that journey by delving into the history of the Bay Area specifically, because that is a place that we'll always both have ties in. And there's always more history to be learned, because there's history that we were never taught in school, as well as how communities and organizations are actively shaping the history of Asian Americans in the Bay Area. So I'm really excited because I think this will also really push us to pursue opportunities to talk to people in academia, historians, as well as grassroots organizers. So that is something I'm really excited to kind of just pursue by the end of 2021. So yeah.
Really, really exciting, especially for listeners, in this part of the world. It's fascinating to learn about all this local content topic, especially your hometown of the Bay Area. But how about universal themes? What are your values and commitments as a podcast host? How do you and your co-host Sophia, right, are making universal themes, from Asian Americans' lives relatable to others, even for those of us who are in Asia, like me in Singapore?
Yeah, so some of our values and commitments for especially season 3, like we always make sure we sit down at the end of each year to talk about what we want to pursue, what our intentions are. And so I'll share just mainly 3 values that we have. So the first one is more community outreach and community building. So at the end of 2020, we had our first public event with other podcasters, and they were all Asian women. And being able to also participate in the first ever Asian Podcast Awards really allowed us to connect with many more Asian American podcasters and storytellers, as well as leaders in the community. And so we're really excited to experiment with new ways of connecting with everyone and creating close friendships and sustainable communities. I think Clubhouse is already a platform that we are exploring right now. Doing the IG Live has been really, really wonderful to deepen our connection with our current following and our current listeners. So that will be the first value. The second value is diversity and inclusion. And so we recognize that we are we started this podcast because we felt that we weren't seeing a lot of narratives about Asian American women, but there are so many more narratives that are really not getting the spotlight. And we feel that we are in a place where we are able to hold space authentically and thoughtfully for those people who maybe have not gotten a chance to get their stories told. And so we really want to challenge ourselves this year to listen to perspectives that we don't come across as often, but are just as important to spotlight. So we're hoping that we can continue to lead with being intentional and lead with compassion as we hold space for those narratives that we're really eager to learn more from. And the final value is joy and vulnerability. So some of our most loved episodes are the ones where we share moments that brought us so much joy. Like some of these episodes were like giggling, like so crazy. And also some episodes are ones where we share a lot of wounds that we were really hesitant to open up about originally. And I think we've just been overwhelmed with so much gratitude for the positive response that we've gotten on those episodes. And so we want to continue to open up because we need more, I've been so eager to see more vulnerability from other people. And I think the best way to to see that is for us to create those opportunities ourselves. So those are our 3 values this year. I'd love to hear if Sophia, you have anything else you want to add?
No, that was so beautifully explained. I can answer the second part of your question, Wayne, which is like, how do we make universal themes from Asian Americans' lives relatable to others? And that's such a great question. So I'm very excited to chat about this. So, well, I'll start with a disclaimer, actually. I don't think Asian Americans or anyone, I don't think we're obligated to make our experiences relatable to others. I think it's totally valid to celebrate experiences that are very unique to us without having to explain or justify or draw the connection. For example, we talk a lot about intersectionality. You know, we are Asian American women, we are straight, 1.5 generation immigrants, all of those things. However, I think one way to amplify underrepresented perspectives, which is one of our core values, one way to do that is to motivate other people who are not Asian American to pay attention to these perspectives. And one way to make them pay, or one way to motivate them to pay attention, is by making these experiences relatable to them. And so after our guest shares something, we will affirm something that we heard that we think really can resonate with other people, and we will really explicitly draw the connection between what they experienced and put it into more universal language that we think that will help other people identify this experience as something that they could also experience as well. And so I think taking the time and care to draw that connection makes these stories really understandable and relatable to people who, no matter what your identity is or where you live in the world.
Yeah, and I know you say care, but in many ways, because we are two individuals hosting this guest, a lot of times, like you and I, we have a lot of similarities, but we also have different experiences by virtue of living in different cities and working in different industries. And so to see like how you are making the connection and finding the way that it relates to your life is really interesting for me to listen to, because I might have a different way of resonating with it. And I think just the multitude of sharing those connections hopefully encourages other folks to find those connections on their own as well.
Yes, I love that. And, you know, with all of the initiatives that we're doing to build community and share these reflection questions and invite all of our listeners to reflect together, our listeners are not just Asian American women. There are people all around the world of all identities. And our community really, when they participate in these conversations and reflections, they are helping us to broaden the reach of these perspectives, which we are so grateful for.
This is absolutely beautiful. You know, you guys are connecting to everyone around the world, connecting to the universe. So it's like, how often do you have, spirited conversation with people who know how hard it is and yet how good it feels, right, to really connect with others? And you're doing it through your podcasting medium. So for that, I'm really grateful to you for agreeing to do this, Sophia. And I'm really grateful to you for introducing Dayun to come onto the show, to the festival as well. So it's great to meet two brilliant podcasters doing their own thing and just doing themselves, And I'm just really appreciative of your coming on to this show. So any last words for our audience before we reluctantly have to let you go due to time constraints?
I will say we release episodes every Sunday. So if you're ever interested in checking out our podcast, we're available on every podcast platform as long as you search up Bamboo and Glass. And we also, Instagram is our most used social media platform. So if you do want to connect with us one-on-one, you can find us at Bamboo and Glass. And also a lot of times what we'll do when we get new followers is actually we'll send over a message asking you if you want an episode recommendation. So if you are overwhelmed by all the episodes that we have, definitely feel free to follow us on Instagram and we'll send over some episode recommendations. But thank you so much, Wayne, for having both of us. It was such a pleasure to be able to meet you, and you asked such thoughtful questions. I also want to really affirm you for all the responses and the thoughtful responses that you've given us on this podcast so far.
So remember, guys, those who are watching this on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch, right? Make sure you Google for this, or just ask, hey, Google, play the Bamboo and Glass new episode. And of course, your voice and Sophia's voice will start to fill our with great and awesome content. So I can't wait to listen to what's coming up next for your podcast. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Fantastic. And that's Sophia as well as Dahyun Kim. So it's like first time I ever met Sophia's friend, but she's really awesome. And actually, tell her story about bamboo and glass and share with us, so generously about that story as well as how it transpired and what they are working on next as well. So please go and support them and make sure that I'm pointing at the right banner. Yeah, this one, Bamboo and Glass. Yeah, go and check out their podcast. And I can't wait to bring on more guests to this festival and maybe tell us more about some of the other topics that they cover in their podcast. And we just have two really awesome ladies, and I'm looking forward to a gentleman from the UK who's coming on to this festival and to talk about how fast fashion industry has really hit a crucial critical point right now with the pandemic that has actually shown up a lot of the mistakes that the industry has actually made during the past few decades, in terms of churning out the fast fashion and making lots of clothes that are sitting in warehouses, piling up on inventory, and nobody will actually, buy them anymore because, the pandemic happened. Of course, 2020 has made a lot of these, problems and issues come to a fore. Later on, he'll be coming on. His name is Warren. And of course, he has his own podcast as well called Before the Goods. And I'm excited to bring him on next. I think we are just about 10 minutes away from him appearing backstage, so I could officially welcome him on stage and maybe jam with him on topics about fast fashion. So tons of other fantastic guests to look forward to as well for our 2-day podcast festival event. And I'm already halfway through, and I'm energized because even though I have very little sleep, I'm energized by the energy that the guests actually brought on to this festival, and they also reinvigorate me and make it actually a very fun thing to do. And it's definitely not because of a lack of sleep that actually causes me to stop doing this. I'll actually keep doing this for as long as I possibly could. And this is really fun so far. So I'm gonna maybe also take a little break and maybe a quick toilet visit, before Warren comes on in the next 10 minutes. In the meantime, maybe just enjoy this scenery. This is a scenery that is directly, broadcast live, and you can actually see, my shadow. This is my setup. I have an iPad Pro sitting right on the left side of my table where I have some, bullet points, so I don't actually have those brain freeze moment where I actually do not know what to ask my guest next. So that's always on. And of course, my MacBook Air allows me to continuously, look at the screen and make sure that all these graphics are popping up the right place at the right time. And of course, you're also staring right outside the Singapore scenery. Basically, it's raining, it's drizzling right here in Singapore. Feels a little bit like UK weather, right? Normally, we have sunny, hot and humid conditions here because we are situated right near the equator. So it's something that is quite unusual that it's actually raining today. So probably this might continue. Normally December and January are the rainy season. So this is actually expected, but not quite unexpected as well. So I'm gonna just maybe leave you with this scenery while I leave for a quick toilet break. Meanwhile, just stick with us. I'm not gonna actually end this broadcast yet because we have Warren coming up soon in about 10 minutes. So I'm just gonna make a quick trip to the toilet, and I'll see you guys really, really soon. Yeah. So see you shortly. So I'm right back on the hot seat in my studio. In fact, this is my home where I actually do my podcast. So I think for the past 1 year, nearly 1 year. In fact, less than 1 year. Yeah, I think the pandemic only really wasn't around February or March when everywhere around the world is under lockdown, right? So maybe just talk a little bit about my experience doing podcasting during this period. I think it's been about a year, nearly a year of just doing virtual podcasts in this format where I actually interview, bring on my special guests to my different podcast shows. And of course, just like many podcasters, we don't just focus on one particular genre. We like to, have diverse topic where we can bring on different characters and different guests, to talk about the topics that are close to our hearts. And I have various interests. I think music is one of the biggest interests in my life. So I have a podcast that basically talks about bands that you love to see before you or they kick the bucket. So that's why it's a show that is titled Bucket List Bands Podcast. And that show has actually grown to be more focused initially from just talking to fans. Now it's actually talking to musicians, the bands themselves, actually came on to the show to talk about either their new releases or their new album. So that show is something that is really close to my heart, and it's definitely 100% non-profit chasing, no advertising, no host-read ads. And it's just purely, a fanboy, a person like me talking about my favorite bands and bands that I would like to see before I kick the bucket. So yeah, that's just one out of several other shows that I do. And I understand that Warren is already backstage. Let's see whether he's able to come on earlier on. Let's see.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, my friend, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. I just woke up from a short nap, so I'm feeling energized, 100% energized from just less than 1 hour of sleep.
Wow, that's amazing. So have you just kept going, Wayne? Have you just literally, is this just like a marathon of talking? Is that what it is?
It's just a podcast show that is super long, so I'm intending to just let it run until I can't do it anymore. And actually, the bed is there's a sofa bed right next to me and one in the bedroom. I can just hop onto the bed, right? And
that's awesome.
Yeah, so anytime when I'm almost dead beat, right, the bed is just right next to me. So don't worry about that.
Cool. That's cool. Well, it's 7:00. It's just approaching 7:00 here, and I set my alarm, and I thought, it really feels like the middle of the night still, but that's all cool. It's all good. So, anyway, how's it been? Has it been good?
It has been wonderful. I think it has been pretty productive because whenever I can work on something, right, without worrying about whether I'm getting enough sleep, that means I'm productive. And that's a little bit dangerous because health takes a backseat, right? Yeah, I'm sure that you have lots of stories like that to tell as well, especially when you walk us through some of your journey, your process of building your e-commerce store, building your own brand, and of course doing your podcast as well. I think is what actually brought us together, right? The fact that you're a podcaster, that means that you're my tribe.
Yeah, it's a strange thing, podcasting. I never really thought I was going to get into it, and it's been absolutely brilliant. And I think the wonderful thing about it is not only connecting with people, but also just it's the way that it outreaches and gives that sense of authority. Do you know what I mean? That real sense of authenticity behind what you do. And I think it's just been a great way of me connecting with people without actually trying to sell to them, which is really unusual because I've spent all my life selling things to people. So it's just been fabulous. It really has been really good. And I did my first room in Clubhouse yesterday as well. So that was really good. Really, really good.
Let's jump right in and tell us about that experience, because I think every podcaster is seeing more action in Clubhouse for the fact that they could get an instant audience that feedback to them about the content or the topic they're talking about. And of course, getting feedback is what everybody loves, right? It's not like either on Facebook or maybe even LinkedIn or Instagram to a certain extent, where it's all about the likes, all about the shares, and all these vanity metrics. Doesn't really matter if you have 1 million likes, for example, but you don't get the positive feedback from your audience that says that what you're saying makes sense. What you're saying actually enriched my life, or the knowledge I share is incredible. Again, keep on doing it. Here's $10 a month. Please keep on doing it, for example.
Yeah.
So maybe you can give us your hot take on Clubhouse, and also the news that came out recently about how they are allowing podcasters to also monetize their show by actually moderating their own rooms, having their own channels, which they actually term it as rooms.
Yeah.
So how was that experience so far, hosting your first ever room, and what do you think is the future of Clubhouse as a podcasting future?
For me, the experience yesterday was difficult because I think when you've got your own setup with regards to podcasting, and you've got an understanding of what you want to achieve out of the show, and also how to draw the nuggets of wisdom out of the guests, that's one thing. When you go in a new arena and you go to Clubhouse and it's a new format, I've only been in it for, what's the date today, 26, for about 11 days, 12 days. So I'm still very new to it. And when you become a moderator, there are things about taking people down to the audience. And so I think it's just the tech. That's the only difficult thing. But it's the same as anything. When you're in an environment where you're an authority and you can speak with confidence about what you're doing, then it just flows. And it is just like what I think the way that Clubhouse is going to evolve is it's just going to be like an interactive radio station. I mean, that's really the way it's going to go. And I think the fact that Clubhouse is full of, obviously it depends how you've kind of aggregated your rooms, but there's a lot of business on there. And I think for me, I kind of see this vision of almost like a LinkedIn on audio steroids. That's what the kind of phrase I've kind of put together, because I think that's exactly what it is. It's just been amazing. As I say, yesterday's room was very quiet. We had kind of 10, 12, 15 people kind of coming in and out, but the engagement was really, really good. And I think as a podcaster, the opportunity of speaking to someone's direct mindset in their ears for 30, 40 minutes is a really powerful thing. And I think this will be the same. I really do believe that Clubhouse is going to be a huge key to open up people's businesses, especially through podcasting.
Do you think that Clubhouse is going to kill, or should I say, there was a saying, right? There's a song titled by, was it the Boggles or the Goggles? I can't remember, when they came up with a song called Video Killed the Radio Star, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened after that was that the internet came along, and people were saying that the internet would kill the video star. So, and after that, of course, podcasting arrived, and people were saying that podcast is going to kill the Instagram stars, for example. Mm-hmm. And of course, now we are in 2021, and there's this new app called Clubhouse that seems to be on everyone's lips, and everyone, including podcasters, are like going there and try to see more action, and even recording the podcast shows over there. Do you think that this will kill the podcast star?
I think it may affect the kind of overall look of podcasting. However, what it does, it now opens up a brand new audience. It allows everybody. I mean, you've got things like Anchor, which kind of turn the key with regards to allowing people just to use their mobile phone to start podcasting, which opened up a huge amount of people that were just having a go. They didn't have to invest in kit. They didn't have to have great microphones and headphones and understand editing and all that kind of thing. So I think what it will do, I think it will help discover great voices that have kind of been under the radar previously, and I think that's the benefit of it. It just opens it up. I think it will give people much more of a voice because it's so easy to use.
Exactly, and I think it just reminds me of Party Line as well. And when everyone can just jump in and just get engaged in a conversation, and some of this conversation can be super long. And it's really addictive, right? It's like a drug, and it's actually pulled me away from Netflix and spend more time on Clubhouse for the very reason that I'm getting an instant reaction from the content I'm consuming, from what I'm hearing. So it's really like what you mentioned, LinkedIn, but on steroids. I really like the way you put it, yeah? So let's maybe put aside this topic about Clubhouse and dive into something that's more close to your heart, because I think I haven't officially or formally introduced you yet to our Asian audience in this part of the world. We are very excited to have Warren Parker-Mills, fashion and lifestyle consultant and podcast host and entrepreneur, joining us from the UK and share with us how, in addition to creating an e-commerce brand before stores during lockdown, he has also been recording interviews with some incredible guests for his podcast series called Behind the Brand. So take it away, Warren. Tell us the story behind Before Stores.
Wow, where do I start, man? I mean, we haven't got that long, unfortunately. But yeah, Before Stores is a business that I kind of had dormant for a couple of years. I always knew, to give you a little bit of a snapshot of my experience. So I've been in the industry, the fashion industry, for 30 years, okay, man and boy. And yeah, it's changed a lot, Wayne. It really has, you know, and I know we had a conversation previously and I kind of gave you a bit of a snapshot of the industry, but it is it's a wonderful industry, you know, apart from the Vogues and the GQs and all that high-end designer thing, the hustle, the rawness, the grit, the determination, the late nights, the struggles, the pains, the suppliers, the customers, the retailers, you know, it all adds to this eclectic mix of chaos, really, but it is a wonderful, wonderful industry. So, you know, as I say, I've spent 30 years in it and I've worked with lots of different international brands. I've worked with pretty much I'm based in the UK, so I've worked with every high street retailer, you know, from Selfridges, Harvey Nichols, through to TK Maxx or TJ Maxx, if you're in the States listening to this, and Argos and everyone in between, really. So a huge width there of kind of contacts and network. And for many, many years, I kind of thought of this idea where I wanted to kind of redefine the way that consumers consume product. You know, we talk about fast fashion and it's very on trend at the moment, and as well as the whole sustainability thing and everything else. And what I really wanted to try and do was just redefine the way that people consume, but also the way that brands manufacture, and put a different shift in the paradigm there to how they kind of develop product and obviously get that out to the consumers. So behind the brands is an offshoot of that, and it kind of quantifies what I'm trying to do. But the brand itself is an e-commerce platform designed to educate consumers to buy more consciously, really. That's what it is. And I'm delighted to say I've got some amazing brands on board already. Hope to launch in the next few weeks. And yeah, it's looking really good. The platform looks great. I'm really happy with it. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, I have to say, which I really do need to walk away from and just get it out there, because it's doing something a little bit different, because we're not selling inventory that's available now. We're selling stuff that you will be able to go on Before Stores, see products that you've never seen before anywhere on the high street. You won't have seen it on the internet. It's all pre-ordered product, and it's not just that way, and it's about taking the consumer on this journey as well, and really getting them under the skin of the brand and allowing the brand to communicate all their messaging to the consumer. So that's what it is in essence.
In a way, you are breaking, you know, away from the mold, how traditionally fashion consumption or retail is actually being done, right, for decades. And what you're saying is that you want to change the way that people discover and actually buy from fashion brands. And you want to actually demonstrate that fashion can and should be produced differently, along with a host of like incredible designers, artisan creators, and all the lifestyle brands that they are already on board, right, from around the world. You'll be bringing this eagerly, you know, your eagerly awaiting audience a completely new buying experience. So can you tell us why Before Stores has that belief that you can redefine how fashion brands sell, how fashion brands create, and how they communicate with the end consumer?
You know what? It's a great question, and it's a really difficult thing. And I think I have to be realistic as well, Wayne. You know, there are some massive players in my industry, massive players, you know. Even in the UK, there's some big hitters there. And, you know, the consumer over the years has kind of slotted into this preset of, I buy it now, I get it tomorrow, which is fantastic. You know, we've all done it. We've all bought from the likes of Amazon and people like that. And I think for me, what I'm trying to do is just be really selective with the brands that I work with that get it, and also get an audience that get it. So, you know, listen, we might be having this conversation in 6 months' time and I say, it was a great idea, but no one bought into it. You know what? I think for me, I think the idea, and certainly as people I spoke to a great brand the other day, a cashmere brand and based in the UK, and they just got it. They just got it. The industry needs it. You know, for many, many years, and I could go on and tell you stories of some pretty horrendous things that I've sat in meetings and thought, You know, that's not great. It's not great. The way we're working there is not ethical, and there's a lot of hidden secrets as well. And I'm not a whistleblower, Wayne. I'm not going to, write a book and tell the world of all these stories, because it's irrelevant. We have to now draw a line on where we were and look forward to trying to do something in a different way. And, if I can get a couple of thousand people on board who understand understand the mindset and what I'm trying to achieve here, I've already succeeded. If I can get one person buying into this concept, I've succeeded. I've got brands on board, as I say. And when I talk about the brands, Wayne, I've got people that, are going around the streets in Brazil and finding old chairs and old table legs and constructing the most beautiful jewelry. Goldsmith standard jewelry from this product. I've just got this eclectic mix, and I think when I put that out there, I'm also helping the brands amplify what they do, because the messaging often gets left. I've worked for bigger brands, and I've had big meetings, and it's all about the product, which is great, and the product is king, but it's often what gets left on the table is all the storytelling. That's where podcasting comes in. I mean, yourself, it's all about storytelling. And my industry doesn't really understand that to some extent. Some people do it really well. Brands like Patagonia and those types of people, they have an amazing story, and they've just got this aura of what they do and why they do it. And there are a lot of brands I speak to that are so busy trying to sort out products and factories and lead times and samples and fits and all those restrictive kind of actions that kind of slow them up. And what they really do need to do, regardless to getting out on Instagram and just posting beautiful pictures, is getting under the skin of the brand and really, really hammering home the values, the morals, what they stand for, how they operate. There's part of the platform which will allow brands to be in their factories and take videos on their phone, not flash videos that have been pre-edited and everything else, real, raw, authentic videos saying, these are your shoes being produced and they're on their way. And I think that interactivity and that connectivity with the consumer will hopefully put the brands in good stead and set them as masters of what they do, but also it will give an emotional and real authentic connection with the product, with the consumer. And hopefully we can avoid all this flippant, oh, well, I've bought it today, I'm gonna kind of wear it out tomorrow, I'll wrap it back up and I'll send it back on Monday. That's got to stop. We have to really start looking at our industry and start putting really fundamental things in place at the start of the process, not at the end. We can't change it at the end. So, as I say, it's a vision that I've got. It's something I'm really passionate about, and hopefully that comes across. But, I'm a businessman, Wayne, and I need to do what I need to do. And it may diversify to some extent, but it won't change the fundamentals of what the brand's about.
It seems like your objective is to take actions. And of course, you have this vision and you're taking a lot of action, especially during the pandemic, right? To create something out of nothing. And your objective is to change the wholesale, the retail and marketing landscape by formulating this completely new approach to global e-commerce and fashion, by doing different forms of storytelling, which is so compelling even to hear your ideas and to see them come to fruition by listening to your podcast, yeah? And also watching and visiting your website, which I absolutely love, by the way. You have a fantastic looking website, and your Instagram is so on point. I'm compelled to click and go to the website and order something by just looking at the visuals that is on display. Can you tell us, is David Bowie one of your inspirations?
Pardon me? Sorry, repeat the question.
Is David Bowie one of your inspirations? David Bowie?
Yeah, I think, the guy, I mean, there's a few icons that I look at, and there's some people that kind of epitomize cool. And cool's a really interesting word, actually. And, David Bowie, I love his music. I'm a massive Prince fan as well. And again, that's because there's the performance there. And I suppose with Before Stores, the performance is the website. It's how it looks. It's the beauty of it. It's the aesthetics and everything else. And that's great. But you can't just survive on the looks of everything, There has to be substance there. And when you look at artists, when you look at musicians like Bowie and like Prince and even Michael Jackson and all those great Elvis. And I'm thinking John Lennon now, God, you've got me going now, Wayne. I'm thinking of all these people, they're iconic in their own right. So visually they're iconic. But then actually when you start digging behind that and you listen to their music and their talent and their trueness and their authenticity, that's really what it's all about. And I think, the word cool it's really interesting because before it became Before Stores, was actually called We Love Cool. And the reason I chose that name was, and I will do something with a brand. I'm going to do a brand maybe potentially further down the line. But the reason I chose that word, we love, well, the kind of phrase we love cool is a great word because it's transcended like 80, 90 years. It's always been in our vocabulary. And I think, if you go back to the 60s, it was rad and it was wicked in the 80s. And, there's all these generations that we've had variations of that word, but cool has always been there. Whether it's Mother Teresa or Barack Obama or any politicians, everyone uses the word cool. And it's kind of the default word. Everyone knows what it means. It's a really, really important word. And going back to David Bowie, he was cool, man. God, he was cool, for so many reasons. And I think, in fashion, there is an element of trying to put on this coolness, but you've got to dig a bit deeper. And I think the good brands, the brands that stand the test of time are the ones that go beyond cool. They're cool for lots of other reasons other than just looking great.
I think you nailed it on the head right there because cool is also being authentic, right? Like what one of our listeners or viewers on LinkedIn is actually, I think he's indicated it. He put it in the nail on the head as well. Cool is being authentic. I think David Bowie epitomized that because he's always not just about fashion, but also about being cool with substance. And so many years since he has passed, right? But it's still revered, especially not just in the music industry, but in the artistic world, in the fashion world, in the movie industry, in so many realms. He has actually break boundaries, and his work has actually carried his legacy forward in terms of we will never ever forget him. And I think he's also perhaps the best role model in terms of being someone who's the antithesis of cynicism, bad faith, and Philistinism. I think this is where we can all learn from because entrepreneurs like yourself, have all these role models to look up to. Maybe part of his model, which is about always bringing people together, connecting with them, and also going for the bigger, for the positivity and for the bigger picture and to make sure that everybody are elevated, and everybody is part of something is something that's incredible to learn from and also really, really inspiring. So you mentioned about Prince as well, and you mentioned about Michael Jackson. These are all my bucket list bands, and unfortunately, they've all kicked the bucket.
Yeah, it is sad, but I mean, legacy is a really interesting word as well. I've got 3 kids and I want to try and kind of empower them to understand a little bit more. They're late teenagers, so the eyes roll, everything, it's very, very difficult. But, legacy is really important. And I think as you get older, you start thinking a little bit more about what you're leaving behind. And one of the things I wanted to talk about really, just on that point, it just sprang into my mind again, is the value of podcasting. And the reason why I say that is because it struck me quite early on, actually, when I started podcasting. I was thinking, do you know what? When I'm gone, my voice will still be here. My voice will still be here. It'll be in the cloud somewhere, But my kids and my kids' kids and my kids' 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 kids, potentially, if they want to hear great-great-great-great-grandfathers listening, they can hear me. They can hear my voice. They can hear me. They can relate to me. They can understand there's a person there other than just a branch on a family tree. And I think that, again, Wayne, is really, really powerful. And I think podcasters, especially with families, they need to take that into consideration because that is a gift. That is something that we are leaving a digital footprint for generations to listen to. I don't know if you've ever thought, I'm not interviewing you now, but I don't know if you've ever thought about it in that way that, actually stamping your voice in time, which is exactly what we're doing, is something which is really quite empowering. And I think a lot of people need to think about that. It's important.
I've thought about that 100%, in terms of like, if I kick the bucket, right, maybe tomorrow, at least I have all these podcast episodes that I left behind for my kids. If they miss me, right, they could just, talk to their smart speaker, play the last episode of PodFest Asia featuring Wayne and Warren. And suddenly both of our voices fill the entire apartment.
Yeah,
and perhaps if we are feeling a little bit lonely, we are accompanying them in their journey, right? Or even during their micro moments of happiness or even darkness. So it's always great to leave behind things for future generations. And with the trend of also podcasts being recorded and filmed while they're being made, like for example, this particular festival has been it's been recorded and taped at the same time, so that there's video and also audio replays. It allows us to live on even long after we are gone.
Yeah. No, it's really powerful. I think it's a really powerful thing. And I think podcasting is, it's very, very easy. I mean, I was surprised how easy to entry it was. I've always thought, I used to be many, many years ago, Wayne, gosh, we're diversifying here, but I used to be a dancer. So I used to be on stage. And that's what I used to do when breakdancing and popping and robotics and all those types of things were really cool, going back to that word, in the 1980s. That's what I did. I traveled all over. I did all sorts of things, weird and wonderful things. And I must write a book one day, possibly. And I might put it in there. But, so I'm used to being on stage, and I am a little bit of an extrovert. However, I as we all do, we all have this imposter syndrome to some extent, and we just think, okay, I'm confident when I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm actually going to step into something new. And when I started podcasting, I thought, again, being the perfectionist, the sound has to be right and the audio has to be right and everything else. And you know what? I started off using my iPhone, and I went on Anchor, and I basically just went for it. The first episode is me talking on my phone. It's 10 minutes about why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then as time got on, and the wonderful thing about podcasting is, the community, other podcasters, they've all been there as well. So they've got their own experiences of exactly those moments and those first episodes. So they give you encouragement. Then your family give you encouragement, and friends give you encouragement. And then the shoulders go back, the chest comes forward. And actually, I can do this. And then you just go on. And then obviously the momentum goes. And you start reaching out to people, and people see your credibility, and they understand that actually it's not difficult from a guest's perspective. They can just tune in. They can talk openly about themselves and what they do. And hopefully 9 times out of 10, you get great content, and you just get a real richness to people, which I think is really endearing, actually. And the guest that I've had on, honestly, I mean, one of the guests that was on my room yesterday, co-host, we've built a great business relationship. And I think that's the wonderful thing about it. You get all these crossroads, and they overlap. It's a bit like me and you meeting in a room with Sam. I haven't spoken to Sam well, actually, I spoke to him about 3 years ago, but I met him probably 6 years ago. And, you just have these episodes of your life where you just cross over, and then you're friends for 20, 30 years when you blink. It's just amazing. It really is amazing. So yeah, big up the podcasters, because, and I don't know how many people are listening to this are podcasters, but if you're not a podcaster, get on there, especially if you're on LinkedIn, because you're on LinkedIn for a reason, and probably that reason is business. And trust me, podcasting will turn your business around. It will just amplify what you do and just allow people to hear what you do as opposed to seeing a post.
And it's not an over-exaggeration to say that for many podcasters, podcasting saved their lives. It actually saved my life. So it's like, if I haven't, actually dived straight into this unknown, right, I wouldn't be able to meet Sam during the inaugural version of this podcast festival. He was one of the 21 speakers who came on and dropped so many value bombs during the session, just like you did, And because of that, we invited, and we actually collaborated after that festival appearance by Sam. And we decided to experiment by recording a podcast episode on Clubhouse. And it would turn out to be a wonderful experience, because it led on from one thing to the other. I re-invited him back on Clubhouse, where I opened a room talking about Liverpool football.
Yeah.
And it was like immediately after the game, Liverpool versus Manchester United, where I think it was a boring 0-0 draw. Nothing really much to riff or jam about this dour, match. But guess what? You appeared in the room, and then you started you talking about what you do. And of course, I'm intrigued because I'm always very interested in hearing other people's stories. And nothing fascinated me more than hearing about the journey of what others have gone through, and also to learn from them. So I have so much to learn from you, and that's why I re-invited you back on this festival and to actually do this with you this time, face to face or virtually. Yeah. And of course, we have to also talk about why over the last 30 years, right? You have also seen in the go from really fun-filled, money-making energy in this machine to a commodity-driven, non-ethical, green eye monster. And I think you wrote this in your LinkedIn where you felt that the high street is screwed with so many brands standing still, leaving lots of talented and innovative individuals with shrugging shoulders, simply trying to work it all out, right? So you're actually making an impact by doing what you're doing right now with your brands and also your podcast.
Yeah, I think for me, Wayne, as I say, I've been around for a long time. I mean, these grey hairs, which I like to call executive blonde, just kind of put my own spin on it. But, there's a lot of people in the industry of my age. I'm 53. I'm not a spring chicken, but I've got the energy of a 24-year-old, which hopefully it will stand me in good stead. But, the point I put in my LinkedIn, and please, anyone listening to this, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or any other social medias. But, there's a lot of great people. And I've been really fortunate to have worked with some incredible professionals in the industry who have taught me so much. And I've kind of taken elements out of everybody's game and kind of remolded it into the way that I operate and the way that I handle myself from a business perspective. So I think what did it for me, Wayne, is at the start of lockdown, I went on LinkedIn and I kind of connected with a load of people. And, there were certain individuals that I've known from the industry that were flat. They were really flat, because they were in the same situation as me. When the lockdown hit in the UK on the Sunday evening, when Boris Johnson said, look, that's it, guys, you have to stay at home. My business stopped, literally stopped overnight. And I was in a situation where I was thinking, shit, how am I going to... sorry for swearing. I know it's not even 8 o'clock in the morning here in the UK.
It's a podcast.
Okay, that's cool. We can edit that one out. I thought to myself, this is not great. The shutters have come down. My business has closed, in essence. I had consultancy business and I had clients that I was working on trying to push forward and obviously develop more business with. And everyone just said, nah. You can't do anything. Our hands are tied. So I realized that I needed to pivot and I needed to re-energize and kind of look at a new way of doing and operating the way that I work. But what I was really struggling with was not so much me, but people in my industry who had got complacent. They'd reached this point in their career where they were on the board, they were directors, they were CEOs, they were CMOs, they were top of their game. And then all of a sudden, their life just crumbled. Or were in a situation where they were in between jobs and they couldn't get any more work. Really talented people that were going, so what do we do now? And I think the fashion industry has been saying, what do we do now for a very long time. I used to be in meetings many, many years ago where people say, no one will buy online. No one's going to buy clothes off the internet. And how wrong we've all been. And I think there is this huge change. I think what COVID has done has brought our industry maybe 3 or 4 years ahead, and that it's the last 6 months has accelerated that progression. But it's a changing world, man. It's a really strange place at the moment. But we've all got to stay unified and together and build businesses together and communicate and interact and do what we do. One of the lines that I use in my podcast is, tell us who you are and why you do what you do. And I think when you start asking that question of other people, it's one thing. When you start asking that of yourself, it's really, really powerful.
Yes, indeed. And there's always incredible people out there who are sharing invaluable knowledge, not just in podcasts, in Clubhouse right now, which is on the lips of every podcaster. So you can have your own room and your first experience moderating a room yesterday. So I think that's also where we met. And of course, we recorded an episode for this Liverpool Supporters podcast, and you jumped in with your sound bites. about the game, about how you support Aston Villa, right? Am I right?
No. Birmingham
Mixed up with
City.
another person.
Not Aston Villa. Not the Villa. No. Birmingham City all the way. Yeah.
Birmingham City.
Birmingham. Yeah, that's it. Everyone's who are they? No one knows who they are.
Noisy neighbors.
And you know what? Absolutely. And I think for me, I'd be lying if I said I was an avid fan, but all my family are Birmingham City fans. So my uncles and people like that are Birmingham City fans. So I have to stay loyal to those guys. I've had the great fortune of kind of sitting on the fence of Man United for a number of different reasons, and but I just love great football. I just love anything like that, anything competitive where people have to challenge themselves. It's great, So it was a pleasure meeting you, Wayne. And, we must keep this thing going. We must keep the communication going. I would love to kind of do more out in Asia. And obviously that's a huge growth market and certainly on my radar with regards to before stores and also behind the brands. I want to try and get some Asian brands involved. Everyone's English is incredible. I don't speak Mandarin, unfortunately, but if anyone wants to come on, please connect with me. And let's get it going. Let's spread the word.
I immediately think of someone who will be a perfect guest for you. I actually produced his podcast. His name is Daniel Boy. He's the godfather of Singapore fashion. So I'll definitely want to connect both of you, and maybe you can interview him.
Yeah,
and the reverse can happen as well. You can actually guest on his show. So it's like that's how we elevate one another, right? And basically help one another. I think it's important to connect, like what you mentioned as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I wish you, all success with your podcast, Behind the Brands, and of course before stores as well. And continue to do your clubhouse gigs, because I think it's very inspiring to hear you hosting a regular room and starting since yesterday, right? Showcasing creative people and their fashion brand. So tell us what else to expect. And any last message for our audience before we let you go?
Not really. I think, I appreciate you having me on, Wayne. It's always interesting to kind of expand and talk to new audiences. For me, I just want everyone to be positive. We will get to the end of this whole debacle. And I know in different areas of the world, things are easing up and everything else. But I think it's recalibrated everybody. I think it's just made people appreciate what they've got, who they are, who they love. And why we're all here. We're all on the start line again. It's starting again, and that's what we've got to try and do. Regardless to who you are, what you've done previously, you're a human being living in a world which is changing, and we've got to change with it. And I just really thank you, Wayne, and I wish you guys all the best. I'll keep you up to speed on where I am, and let's just keep talking, man, because I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
See you in Clubhouse, and hopefully re-invite you back again to this festival, which is a monthly thing, by the way. So we can find out from you what's going on over there in the UK. And of course, what's up with Before Stores and Behind the Brand podcast. What else we can expect from the next lineup of guests as well. So it's always exciting to reconnect and to constantly update each other. So thank you, Warren.
All right, mate.
Joy to have a conversation with. And let's do this again one more time, all over again next time.
For sure. All right. Thanks, Wayne. Take care, man.
Thank you, Warren. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, mate. Bye-bye. Cheers.
And that's our afternoon session. And thanks, Yuri, for, your great messages. 加油, which means, translated English, right? It means, keep on going on. More power to you. And of course, it's a message that we want to also, communicate to everyone out there who's either a podcaster, who's in this podcasting industry, or you're undecided about joining the podcasting industry. Just make sure that the fact that, whenever you want to embark on a new project, there are always people around that will help you, that will also lift you up and will also collaborate with you. And all you need to do is to make that first ask and, of course, get started. I think it's always very easy to dream big, but it's actually more important to start small and most importantly to start. And of course, we hope that by having content like this, right, it helps all of us to raise the tide and lift our boats and make sure that we all progress together and move forward, because the show, like what Warren has mentioned, must go on. And no matter what happened, right, the show definitely must go on. And I'm going to continue to take another short break. and come back because I have an overnight session right after the tea time late evening session, which will probably start in about 2 hours time, where I have another 4 to 5 great guests who are in the podcasting world coming on to share their wisdom, experience, and resources and network, with all of us. So that will then continue right up to, I think, 9 or 10:30, and giving me an opportunity for another 1.5 hour break before the midnight session gets really interesting. That's where I have basically around the clock from midnight right till morning 6 a.m. I think I have 12 guests lined up. Really looking forward to that because I've tried doing that before, and I realized that I was unable to talk at the end. This time I actually trained for this because I had the experience of the inaugural festival. I've also been working out at the gym, so I've been training for this particular event, and these are the things you train for, right? To make sure I have enough stamina to last the distance. And of course, the whole festival don't end until Friday, 11:30 p.m. So altogether, 36 guests plus who are coming onto the festival. Do check us out again later on. We'll be back on air, live streaming again from my house, from this virtual podcasting studio, which I think you can see right now. This is basically the scenery and what I'm surrounded by. I hope you will join me in my home studio in about 2 hours time from now. So Wayne Chung signing off. And thanks, Yuri, for the shout out. You've been awesome, man. So I look forward to jamming with you tomorrow. So thank you so much, guys. Wayne Chung signing out. Bye-bye.